Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar. I'm Alexis Jay, and I'm the chair of the Life Changers Trust. I've been the chair since 2015, and before that I was a trustee from the beginning in 2012. As we approach the final weeks of the Life Changers Trust, it seems fitting to pause and take stock, to think about our journey over the past 9 years, what we've managed to achieve, and what lessons we have learned along the way. When the Trust opened its doors in 2013, we had a mission to drive transformational and sustainable change for our beneficiary groups: young people with care experience, people living with dementia, and unpaid carers of those with dementia. We set out our principles, values, and approaches with the aim of putting lived experience at the heart of our work, and with an emphasis on relationships, voice, inclusion, and empowerment. Over the years, we have funded many large-scale initiatives, from dementia-friendly communities to champions boards, but we've also invested directly in our beneficiaries with our numerous individual grant schemes. Along the way, I hope I can say that what and how we funded was informed and guided by what people told us was important to them. As we funded, we also commissioned independent evaluations of the projects we invested in. However, there was also a strong desire amongst trustees to better understand and evaluate the impact of the trust as a whole. So, in June 2019, we commissioned the University of Stirling and Ipsos MORI to carry out an independent evaluation of the trust. The evaluation project brought together findings from diverse sources in order to consider the extent to which the trust had met its aims, to demonstrate the impact and outcomes for our beneficiaries, to assess the place and impact of the trust in the wider policy and practice context, and of course to identify models of funding that would benefit others in the future. A team of community researchers, including people living with dementia, unpaid carers, and young people with care experience, also formed a core part of the evaluation team. They worked alongside researchers from the University of Stirling and Ipsos MORI across the various elements of the research, and we'll hear more about that in due course this morning. And in this evaluation, there is much useful learning to be had, both in terms of practice and approach, but also learning about what may not have worked so well and where others can adapt and improve. And time will tell whether our aspirations for the long term of the trust will be realised, but we are, of course, optimistic. So today is a time for reflection and a time to look to the future. First, though, I have just a few brief housekeeping points to make. There is no break scheduled in the programme today, so if you need some time away from your screen, then please feel free to do so. This webinar is being recorded and will be on the Life Changers Trust website in a few days, so you can catch up then if you miss anything. You will all be notified by email when it's available. Please also feel free to use the chat function if you'd like to share any comments. There's a drop-down menu that gives the option to share your comments just with the panel or with everyone. And it's always nice to share with everyone, so please remember to select that option. So thank you for bearing with us, and now on with today's events. We're going to start by hearing from the University of Stirling, who carried out the independent evaluation. Their report goes into significant depth, looking at, amongst other things, the extent to which the trust has met its aims, the impact on our beneficiaries, the importance of lived experience and relationships, as well as flexible and responsive funding and considerations to take forward to support sustainable change. It is also threaded through with personal stories and reflections from people living with dementia, unpaid carers, young people with care experience, and the myriad of people who support them and walk with them. Louise McCabe was part of the evaluation team from the University of Stirling, and she's going to talk about some of the key learning for the future. So I'm going to ask Louise to join me on screen now. Welcome, Louise. I'll now hand over to you.
Thanks, Alexis. That's a very useful introduction to the Trust and to our evaluation. So I'm just going to take about 10 minutes this morning to give you the headlines and highlights from the evaluation project. For those of you who may have seen our report, it's fairly lengthy and in depth. So what I've tried to do this morning is to pull through some of the headlines really and just focus on those today. So this is our opening and our list of authors for the final report. In fact, there were more people involved in the evaluation over the span of the project. So it was a very busy project and involved all sorts of different people. It was a really engaging and interesting piece of work for us to do. And as Alexis said, it was a collaboration between Ipsos MORI, the University of Stirling, and with our community researchers. So our project had three overarching aims: to tell the history, to tell the story of the Trust, to understand how it came to be and how it has functioned over the past almost 10 years. To demonstrate the impact and outcomes for the three beneficiary groups, and to demonstrate the place and impact of the Trust in the wider policy and practice context. Before I move on, just a couple of pieces of terminology. So we use the word beneficiary to refer to those people who have been impacted by trust projects. So we're talking about people living with dementia, unpaid carers of people with dementia, and young people with care experience. So I will use the word beneficiary in the presentation, and that's what I'm talking about. I'll also use the word awardee. Maybe I won't use it very much. I'm not very good at pronouncing it. And that refers to anybody who's received funding from the Trust. Now that might be an individual or it might be an organisation. So just to clarify those points. So the project ran for 2 years, a little over 2 years by the time we got the report written up. And we had 4 main work streams, 4 ways that we engaged with the work. Actually, before I describe that, I should just say this: the square paintings that you see through the presentation were done by Trust staff. So we had a workshop when we were finally able to get together towards the end of the pandemic, and we did some painting. So these are, they represent how staff feel about and represent the Trust. So our 4 work streams, we wanted to understand the Trust and how it worked. So we engaged with staff, with trustees and with awardees. So we engaged with 24 members of staff, 8 of the trustees, and directly with 62 awardees, but probably with a good number more over the course of the project. We engaged with stakeholders out with the Trust. Sometimes those were organisations that were linked to the Trust and sometimes organisations that didn't know very much about the Trust. And we engaged with about 300 organisations. We undertook secondary analysis of Trust documents. So we did quite an in-depth analysis of project and evaluation reports. Around 300 reports were analysed for the project. But we also looked at Trust documents, so documents about how the Trust was set up, how funding's been allocated, meeting minutes, all sorts of really interesting sources of evidence and information. And then our 4th work stream was data collection with Trust beneficiaries. So we engaged with 8 people living with dementia, 14 unpaid carers of people with dementia, and 46 young people with care experience. So the community research team, we've mentioned, Alexis mentioned them, I've mentioned them, we will hear from them in the seminar this morning, so I won't say too much about them, except just to say that they've been an absolute integral part of the work that we've done on the evaluation and have worked with us from the start. So in trying to understand the Trust, we looked at what drove the work of the trust, what underpinned the work of the trust. And what became very clear is that they are an organisation that is led by a set of principles. They have a clear understanding of what they're doing and why they do it. And the staff, and often those working with the trust, hold a set of values that very much guide their work. And these principles and values are then enacted through ways of working and practices that kind of exemplify what the trust is trying to achieve. And this very simplified diagram just tries to hook into some of those key elements. So investment is central to what the trust does. It doesn't go kind of half into things, it goes right in, it invests time. The staff in the trust, they work hard and they invest time and effort, and it invests money. And it invests those things in people. There's a huge value placed on people, there's a value placed on evidence, and there's a value placed on relationships and building those relationships. So that investment in evidence and relationships kind of ties into the bottom two parts of the diagram about the trust being a learning organisation, that it's always about learning, using evidence, understanding what's happening, developing evidence and learning, and the value it places on relationships and building meaningful relationships, whether that's with beneficiaries or awardees or with other stakeholders. And in the centre is always the beneficiary. So it's the beneficiaries within LCT are always placed at the centre of the activities that take place. So I've just got some quotes and images to further illustrate these points. My slides from here on in are mostly quotes, and that reflects the kind of LCT approach of voice and listening to people and what they have to say. So my presentation is very much focused on voice. So relationships are key in all of the work that we do, all of the work right across the programmes. Without that, the game's a bogey. So that's a member of trust staff. And then an awardee from the Young People's Programme. It's not been without its challenges, but we have got a really strong relationship. Our organisations, we have similar values. They have challenged us in good ways and vice versa. So that notion of value-led work and relationships. A key element of the relationships was the investment the trust put in. So the investment they put in to build relationships and particularly to build networks, the kinds of activities that they've done over the years to bring people together, to bring diverse groups of people together, people that might not normally talk to one another. So this is an awardee from the dementia programme, just reflecting the networking was unparalleled. I think the way they worked, there were other projects working like that, but I've never seen a trust pull people together so much, which was one of the really strong things. Learning, so every aspect of the trust's work was done with a kind of inquisitive approach to what can we learn from this, what do we do with that learning, how do we take that evidence forward. So a member of trust staff says, recognising that we are not the experts and working in collaboration has been important to ensuring we gain a rich evidence base and share this learning as widely as possible. And for an awardee, this focus on evidence had helped them develop skills in collecting evidence and in using evidence. So an awardee from the dementia programme shares, to me, it's the best experience I've had with funding, because it has allowed me to have the evidence to get it funded, so another project funded, and to do joined up working with housing, health and social care. Investment, so this notion of investing time, of investing money and of investing effort and hard work. So this is an awardee from the dementia programme. I thought they were brilliant as a funder because they gave us the free rein, but they were also helpful. You know, there was always somebody that you could turn to for advice if we needed it. And then this image represents the second quote, which is an awardee from the Young People's Programme. Just the whole kind of growing a plant, sort of like LCT provides a bit of, it's providing the nutrients, but it hasn't specified which crop to grow. So that kind of supportive investment in relationships with awardees. Beneficiaries at the core. So the image is the LCT is a kind of loud hailer in amplifying the voice of the beneficiaries. Beneficiaries are the expert. They inform every aspect of our work. The image represents people's voices being at the centre of everything and the trust being the amplifier. So these are a couple of quotes from people with dementia and an unpaid care of a person with dementia, but this is really just a tiny, tiny insight into the experiences people shared or that were shared through LCT projects. So this is a person with dementia. The world opens up for me and I can do what I want to do, be able to have fun and able to have friends who are all in the same boat. It's amazing. And then an unpaid carer talking about an event that they had been supported to run. That's why it was such a successful event, because it was really for carers, by carers, and we led the whole thing. For young people with care experience, just open to supporting what we wanted to do. This was the board who are running a charity, putting all this financial trust into a group of young people. So young people reflecting on how the trust valued them, how it trusted them. And then this second quote, I would definitely say that being a leader, being allowed to be in charge of stuff like this and being involved in it has made me much more confident in myself. And leadership has been another theme within the trust, supporting people living with dementia, unpaid carers, and young people with care experience to develop leadership roles and leadership skills. So the third aspect of our evaluation, so the first one was about the trust, the second one was about the beneficiaries, and the third was about the impact of the trust moving out from itself into wider practice and policy contexts. So in terms of influencing others' practice, the way other organisations are working, it was very clear across the evaluation that was happening, that other organisations were adopting the types of approaches and working practices. So the focus on beneficiaries, co-production, participatory type activities, building relationships. So these are just a couple of quotes to support that. So the achievements made by the Champions Board are seen as crucial and a new way of working and something that will be in place forever. So that legacy, that notion of practices being adopted and being taken forward. Another, an awardee from the Young People's Programme. So we're looking at microloans, we're looking at the Grants Award, and certainly it was a trigger of a conversation from attending that event. We may have got there anyway, but it helped formulate the thinking. So again, LCT sharing ideas and evidence, and also supporting networks and supporting people to engage. In terms of policy influence, we did see some differences here in terms of the Young People's Programme and the Dementia Programme, linked, I think, to a wider context and a timing of the work of the LCT. But for young people with care experience, we could see direct influence on national policy. The independent care review, the promise, it was clear that LCT played a really important role in that. We could see significantly higher awareness among national and local policymakers about the work of the LCT and about what they were supporting young people to be doing. For people living with dementia and unpaid carers, we found significant evidence of positioning to influence future national policy. So there have, obviously been changes going on alongside the evaluation, and the LCT is strongly positioned to influence policy as it moves forward. Extensive community engagement and collaboration with local policy actors, and influencing in terms of person-centred, rights-based and co-produced approaches being seen within local policy and within local and national organisations. So just a kind of little summary before I finish up. So the Trust has always talked about transformational and sustainable change. So change that has real impact and that continues. So for beneficiaries, this was about all sorts of different things, but it could be about confidence, it could be about gaining skills, about knowledge, about friendships, feelings of joy, feeling safe, belonging, taking part, leadership, becoming an influencer. For awardees, the longer term change we saw was around adoption of participatory practices and upskilling in terms of collecting and utilising evidence. Further within the kind of wider policy and practice, again, that the notions of co-production, of participation, but also challenging stigma around both dementia and young people with care experience, and people adopting new ways of working and new ways of talking about these people, about these groups. And then for national policy, the Trust has demonstrated impact that will be long lasting through their influence on national level policy for both groups, or all three groups. So just to say, I think you've been given the link, but this is the report, and you can access the report and also a number of films that we've made as part of the evaluation, which you'll also be seeing clips from today. So thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure to present the project this morning, and I will pass back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Louise, for that very comprehensive summary, both of the Trust's work and indeed of your evaluation. You've captured very well what was important to us in our approach over the years. And I'm pleased, of course, that your evaluation confirmed that to a large extent we have achieved that. So thank you. It was particularly gratifying to hear your comments about us being committed to continuous learning, and also your comments about our unparalleled networking. Both of these were hugely important and developmentally important to us. So moving on, alongside this report, the University of Stirling commissioned RED 7 Productions to produce 2 films to illustrate the work of the Life Changers Trust and the methods employed in the evaluation process. The first film is called Trust and features 3 beneficiaries reflecting on the importance of placing creativity, voice, and relationships at the heart of funding and on building a legacy of collaborative practice for the future. In this film, we meet Carol Topper, who has a diagnosis of dementia, and her husband Malcolm, who cares for Carol. They are both members of St Andrew's dementia-friendly community in Carluke and take part in many of their activities, including Heart for Art, which received funding from the Life Changers Trust. And we also meet Rosie, one of the founding members of the Young People with Care Experience Programmes Advisory Group. And here's what they had to say.
And a Thursday morning, and as was before lockdown, was art class. I was up in the morning, I had my shower, I was first in the class, like, morning, I'm here. For somebody that didn't want to go out the door, remember. And I go in and you get all my paints ready and my paint brushes, and I just sit. And for the hours, I'm just happy in my own world. And I do go into my own world. I don't hear hardly anything round about me. And I'm so immersed Is that the right word? In
Yeah.
what I'm doing. And it's so calming. And you're not thinking about anything else other than painting this picture.
I think it's because you just totally switch off.
Aye, I do, Malcolm.
You switch off completely from what's been going on in the house, what's been going on outside around you.
Aye.
It allows you to relax
Mm.
and just, as you say, go into your own little world.
Yeah. It's absolutely wonderful. I can't, it's so hard to explain. It just, my body calms, where I never feel as if my body is calm now. I feel as if with the dementia getting worse, like I feel kind of uptight all the time to be able to do things right and stressed out about doing things right. But when I go to my art class, there's no rights, there's no wrongs. If something doesn't work out, I'll just paint over it. With acrylics, you see you can do this. If it doesn't work out the way you want it to, I'll just paint over that and I'll do that different the next time. And I don't worry about anything. I don't stress. It's just pure fun. And the heart for art gives me confidence to say, oh, I can cook the day. I might only be able to cook you toast and beans, but do you know what? I'm really lucky because I can make you toast and beans a day. I felt as if the 2 hours I got at the class, I began to feel that wasn't enough for me, that I wanted more of that me time. I wanted more of that enjoyment for me. And then Malcolm asked me if I would like a shed. So Malcolm built me a shed out in the garden, and it's my wee pink hot I cry. And I've got my CD player out there, and I set up all my painting stuff. And in the summer it's absolutely brilliant because I can just leave my painting up that I'm working on, and I don't have to pack everything away. Half a day can be passed, and Malcolm will bring me out my lunch, and he'll say, having a wee rest. No, I'm in my zone. I'm in my zone.
But the benefits are twofold, because I get a benefit from it as well. Because whilst Carol's painting, that's giving me respite from looking after her. So we both benefit from it.
I benefit more than you.
Yes, you do. you can have the most benefit. I'll allow you that one. For me, the heart for art is the closest thing to a cure for dementia. Because Carol was dying in front of me, literally, day by day, bit by bit. It was just like a sculpture, chipping away. This illness was taking Carol away from me. Through the heart for art, that slowed that process down for whatever reason, and I can't say what the reasons are because I'm afraid I'm not in that league, but for whatever reason it slowed it down, and I'm getting a longer time with Carol, and I can't think of the day when it's going to come that she forgets me, which it is going to happen. We've got to face it. And it's going to break my heart. And I know it'll break her heart more than it'll break mine. Because I totally love her and she totally loves me. But the heart for art
Has gave us more time together.
is giving us some more time together.
The way that the Life Changes Trust really handed the ropes over to the young people in the group at the time with what do you want to do with this funding had never been done before, as far as I'm aware, to just absolutely say, you shape this, you help us decide what we fund, was something that just didn't happen. It was surrounded by, sort of risk and worry, and the Life Changes Trust just went, let's try it, let's do it, you shape it. So on the individual level, as sort of young people at the time, we were a bit like, what do you mean? You're going to let us effectively almost kind of have so much control over significant amounts of money, and what it's going to be used on was really, I don't like using the word empowering because that suggests that someone who has power is giving it to someone who doesn't. But there isn't another word that I know of. But it was a really empowering experience to have that trust. And I think I can only speak from my personal experience, but to be given that level of trust and respect and almost like authority and equality within an organisation of people that I saw as professionals just boosted mine and I think everyone else's confidence and skills, and taught us so many practical lessons. Some of the work that's followed on from this is incredible, and I guess you can't directly attribute that to the Life Changes Trust, but I think it definitely kind of tipped things over the edge in a positive way of letting people trial new ways and mimicking and copying the setup of the Life Changes Trust and the advisory group and the influence that they had in their own organisations. And there's just brilliant things going on all across Scotland. Brilliant things. And one of the other things that the group did was we did a lot of training. We did a lot of workshops. We spoke at a lot of events and conferences, raising awareness of the Life Changes Trust and the work of the group, but also helping people to understand the benefits of participation, how to do it, some of the things to think about, how to make it inclusive, how to support participants, and really fed in as a really central voice on how to do this and how to do this in other organisations. And of course that fed into the independent care review, and the care review again elevated the importance of voice even more. And that was thanks to Life Changes Trust and numerous other organisations that had been championing this already for years behind it. But they shared their learning and shared their knowledge and what they knew, fed that into the review. And now we're at a place in Scotland where there's a real appreciation and understanding of the importance and the value of voice, and the Life Changes Trust was a huge part of that. The Life Changes Trust isn't the glue, it isn't the foundation of everything. It was at one point, and it funded and it supported and it helped, but it gave its power and its authority away. It never positioned itself as, we are your funder and you exist because we fund you and you should be grateful. It was never like that. The way that it funded organisations, the way that it supported, the way that it asked people to evaluate what they were up to was different. It was like nothing that had ever happened before. And it really gave projects and individuals and organisations that it funded that independence and that autonomy to shape it how it needed to be shaped in a way that was going to work best for whoever it was working with, rather than the Life Changes Trust having that position of, we know what's best, we will tell you how to do it. The projects that will continue to run and thrive and grow, and now have the knowledge of alternative funders, and they have the relationships with other projects so that they can continue to support each other in those kind of softer conversations behind the scenes. The individuals that have achieved their aspiration, whatever that was, through aspirational awards, the people that attended a conference where they heard the advisory group or someone from the trust talking about the importance of relationship-based practice, or how to listen to people, how to meaningfully work with people, those skills that they'll hold for the rest of their careers, and who they help, the ripple effect, I don't think will ever stop. So the trust might not technically exist, but the work of it and its values and what it taught thousands across Scotland and further beyond will always be around.
Very many thanks to Carol and Malcolm and to Rosie. It was wonderful to hear their reflections so powerfully expressed, and how much it mattered that the relationship with the Trust was marked by respect. As well as collecting personal stories and reflections from those who received funding from the Life Changes Trust, the evaluation report also includes reflections from Trust staff and members of the board, the trustees. Trustees each come with their own particular set of skills and expertise, and each has been on their own unique journey with the Trust. As part of the research for this project, trustees were asked about their perceptions of the Trust, its journey, and how they felt it had developed and evolved. One of our trustees is Alison Petch, who has been with the Trust since September 2017. Alison spent much of her career undertaking research on a range of health and social care issues, then went on to lead 2 organisations focusing on evidence-informed policy and practice. So we have asked Alison, along with Carol Patrick, who is joint CEO and Director of the Young People with Care Experience programme, to share some thoughts with us today. And Carol, incidentally, has been with the Trust from the beginning. So I will ask Alison and Carol to join me now on screen. And welcome to you both, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Morning, Alison. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning. How to follow those 2 beautiful films, I don't know. But
I know, absolutely. We'll just have to give it our best shot. So I've got a few questions for you this morning, Alison. So I'd just like to start off by saying, although the Trust invested significantly in evaluation of the programme work, the trustees were keen to commission an overarching evaluation of the Trust as a whole. Could you just give us a bit of insight into the thinking behind that decision?
yes, well, we'd had many individual evaluations, a whole stack of reports. But really what we wanted to know was, did that all add up to a greater whole? In particular, had those 2 big aims of transformational and sustainable change been achieved? To what extent, if any, had they been achieved? It's probably not a very good analogy, but we provided lots of ingredients, but had they added up to a memorable feast at the end of the day? So that was really our motivation behind going for the overall evaluation.
Yeah, so something about the sum of the parts and seeing what the overall result effectively was. So obviously then, in terms of Stirling University coming in, looking at the story of a 9-year trust and trying to assess its impact on people, on individuals, and we've heard quite a lot about that already, but also the wider policy and practice environment. It was a big project for Stirling to undertake. So were there any aspects of Stirling's approach that stood out for you?
Well, I do think the Stirling team should be congratulated. You know, it can be pretty difficult to come into an organisation and be asked to take an overview of sort of 9 years worth of work, especially I suppose when, you know, the trust has its own opinions about what it's been doing and it's already provided lots of reports. But that is also why it was really important to have that external independent view. And I think, as I've said, they should be congratulated because they managed to distill some sense, some principles from over 300 reports. But they also did a magic mix of the more sort of counting numbers from surveys and so on, but also those much more creative approaches that we've already seen some evidence of. Those workshops where you as staff, I gather, all had to come up with your paintings, photographs that are in the report, and then of course these 2 brilliant films. And I think another really important aspect, and we'll hear from Michael later and see their film, is the real partnership which was created with the community researchers. I think in recent years there's been a bit of a sort of tendency to think it is a good thing to involve community participants as researchers, but it can be done in quite a tokenistic way. Whereas I think Stirling has given a real picture of how that can be done in genuine partnership, but you'll hear more of that anon.
Yeah, and I think those elements of the approach just felt really true to the trust as an organisation as well, you know, really reflecting the way that we've tried to work by getting alongside people and having, as you say, the community researchers as such a key part of the project, and also weaving in those creative elements which have been such a strong theme across our work. So it's really great to see that reflected. Although I think the painting workshop might have been more popular with some of us than others, it's fair to say. So my next question, Alison, were there any surprises for you then in terms of the findings, and also any questions that maybe are still bubbling away for you after reading it?
I suppose it's perhaps it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I think one of the things that has stood out for me from the findings of the report is the commonality across the 3 beneficiary groups, how similar their responses were in terms of the outcomes that they wanted and whether they were achieved or not. And perhaps that shouldn't have been surprising to me because after all, you know, we all want the same sorts of things. But at the end of the day, that universality of need, for example, to challenge stigma, there were some very interesting accounts, both from young people and from carers and individuals with dementia, of their experiences of stigma. And, you know, there are common principles across that. And I suppose at the bottom of it, you know, the need for all of us to be able to assert and have our human rights met. So I think that was probably, many people would probably say shouldn't have been surprised by that, but I think it is a very important element to come out from the report.
Absolutely.
The second thing you asked me was about unanswered.
Yeah.
Again, perhaps it's not so much unanswered as work in progress. This real challenge of getting buy-in from everyone across the board, perhaps particularly at sort of national policy level, and the need for all the great things that we've seen the trust promote becomes sort of commonplace. The report talks about the challenges of some of the structural changes And I suppose that is what I hope we can move forward on in the future.
That's a really good point. I think, I mean, in terms of your first point about the synergy between the people that we're working with, I think that does come over quite strongly. And it's still a question that we're asked, you know, why these population groups and why that particular focus. So I think there was something really interesting about, as you say, the synergy, a lot of the commonality of themes that were coming through from people. And yeah, in terms of your second point, I think we absolutely recognise it's never going to be job done, you know, particularly when we're talking about people with lived experience being at the heart of policy and practice developments. That's something that we're always going to have to keep working on. And that's why I think it's been so important for us to leave that strong evidence base behind us. So that brings me quite well on to my next question then, which is really about legacy, and the report has a number of findings about the legacy of the Trust. What are your hopes as a trustee for the legacy of the Trust?
Well, hopefully the Trust has shown what works and how to make it work. And I suppose I very much hope that the legacy partners will take up that baton, as it were, and build on the foundations, but obviously take them forward, develop them in new areas. I think the key points that I would very much hope that they will, you know, be able to deliver in terms of legacy. And I suppose it builds a bit on what I was saying before, hoping that the approach becomes embedded and routine, and it's not just about special projects or particularly favoured grant supported areas, that the sort of LCT principles infect organisations across the board. I would hope that statutory agencies take up the legacy as much as third sector and other partners, that they are equal participants and are really taking on board these things. And I think I've already mentioned the need to influence national policy, and also hopefully to remember always to try to reach the harder to reach elements of the population. So we've set the legacy partners in place. Hopefully they will prove good ambassadors.
Yeah, I think we're handing the baton on, and hopefully, you know, staying true to Rosie's message in the film there, that we're prepared to step aside effectively, you know, give up our power, not hold on to that, but pass it on to others to grow and evolve in the future. So some strong messages there, I think, Alison. So this final question's maybe a little bit more of a nosy one, but we're interested in, just the impact on you personally of being a trustee. Do you think it's influenced you and influenced the way that you might work or take part in things in the future?
Well, I have to say, on a personal basis, it's been great fun, really enjoyable. I think I was quite lucky in that I joined later in the organisation, when all the teething problems that go with the setting up of any new body had pretty much been sorted out. But, you know, I've got some great memories, things like the Festival of Voices, the Jaggy Nettles Theatre Group, the Fife Regional Dementia event, which was chaired by the Stand people, a whole list of them. But on a more sort of less selfishly, I suppose what I take away from it is the critical need for any organisation to be a learning organisation in the way that the Trust has developed, being responsive to evidence, and hopefully any other organisations I'm involved in, I will hammer on about how important that is, and hopefully try and carry on the principles that we've been hearing about, that was identified. You know, the evaluation brought to life things that I suppose were all a bit subconscious while we were involved in it. So it's great to have had that overarching helicopter view, as it were.
That's great, Alison. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and your thoughts with us this morning.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, many thanks to Carol and to Alison. And I too was particularly struck by the highlighting that Alison did of the commonalities and the cross-cutting nature of so much of our learning, especially about stigma. From the start of the Trust, we always wondered whether that would be the case, that there would be learning in one area that was applicable, transferable to another. And it's been a really important lesson that's turned out to be true. Well, I spoke earlier about the involvement of community researchers in this project, including people living with dementia, unpaid carers, and young people with care experience. They supported the work of the academic team and played a central role in the activities of the project. And they were involved in recruitment, in the development of the research methods, and in data collection and analysis. So now we have a second short film to show this morning, which looks at their experience of moving from project beneficiaries to community researchers, how their understanding of research processes evolved over time, and the benefits of using co-production in research. But before that, we're going to hear from Michael Chung. Michael is a dementia activist, lives with a diagnosis of dementia, and was a core part of the community researchers team. So now I'm going to ask Michael to join me on screen. Welcome to you, Michael, and over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Alexis, for the introduction. Just very briefly, before we go on to look at the film, just talk a wee bit about, how my involvement and all that, and as Alexis is saying, I was diagnosed with dementia about 3 years ago. And basically, after the initial shock, I thought, I'm not going to beat this. I might as well join this. So I started looking for areas where I can be involved with dementia research. And being an ex-student at Stirling University, so I got onto Stirling and eventually linked up with Louise, which put me onto the community researcher program. And that's really how I got to join the community research group. Things we did, and over the last 2.5 years, we did lots of things. I'm trying to remember everything that we did, and I've got it scribbled down, and the list is endless. Just briefly, we interview 3 beneficiary groups, between ourselves, working with the academic staff. Can also say that the community research team are made up of people from all the 3 beneficiary groups, like living with dementia people, people with unpaid carers, and young people program, so it's a really good mix. Things we did was we interviewed all the beneficiary groups over the first 3 or 4 months. And then we also interviewed the LCT trustees and staff as well. And that was really, really good. And then we were also involved in designing and choosing research methods, which was kind of mentioned during the couple of last interviews. And then further down the line, we started looking at different reports from LCT, where the team were involved in looking at the reports and writing bullet points and all that to discuss the reports. And then towards the end, we were also being trained with qualitative and quantitative research evaluation methods. And then obviously the final thing was the final report that you saw today. I find that over the last 2.5 years, our views were well respected. We were taking this equal partnership with the team. And I think that was really very useful in terms of what we did. Highlight of the 2-year program, I can't really single a single one, but I felt that maybe the interviews with the beneficiary group was really, really, really good, because we heard some moving stories and a couple of things we saw. Anyway, just to summarize and what we've done in the last couple of years, we're going to show you an edited version of a film that we did, and maybe you could pick up more from what we did over the last 2.5 years. Thank you.
My name is Alan. I'm a member of the Stirling University Community Researcher team, which is a team of researchers that are looking into the impact that the Life Changes Trust's funding has had. I am a member of one of the beneficiary groups of the Life Changes Trust, just like all of the co-researchers. I am from the Young People with Care Experience group. The other two groups are people with dementia and people who are carers of those with dementia. Today, on the 5th of October 2021, we met to talk about our journey and the project that we've been on for the past couple of years.
I think that was the most enjoyable part for me, was the interviews.
Definitely.
I really enjoyed it. I looked forward to it, and I rehearsed beforehand, getting my questions ready, because we had 5, and it was so easy for the person you were interviewed to move off when you were having to pull them back.
Louise kept us right, didn't she?
To try and get these 5 key points. So it was good to have a framework to work towards, because it kept it structured.
It was good to have those half-hour meeting before the interview as well, with whoever we were doing the interview with. That was key.
That was crucial.
Yeah. Rather than just getting stuck in.
I like the idea that with the 5 question, we didn't just say, right, Louise will do all the 5 questions, we do an alternative question. And that was really good as well, because it means that we felt really involved with the whole interview session as well. You know, I think that was a really good thing about our role, you know.
I guess as well, I mean, I wasn't involved in any of the interviews, but I think it was you that had said it can only benefit the interview to have somebody with lived experience as part of the interview team, as it were. I don't think that can be sort of replicated any other way without you guys.
I did want to say especially that they're having the diversity of the group. I think we did kind of mention that, but that's a key part that I think if this were to happen again, that would be a great part of doing it, not having just co-researchers that are isolated in silos, but having, you know, young people with care experience and people with dementia and carers of people with dementia. I think that's really been, it's so hard to put into words, but I think that's really benefited us in tangible ways as well. I just don't have the words to describe exactly how that's happened. But it's been an important part for me anyway. It's been good.
I was looking back at the notes that Louise written about our meetings and all that, and a lot of the information and the ideas didn't just come from the academic staff, they were shared amongst us, and you guys have taken on board what we've suggested. Some of them were obviously not great, and you just rejected it, which is fair enough, you know. But at the same time, we listen to each other, and we are sharing the experience from each other and bouncing off each other with ideas. And I think that's the great thing about the team, you know.
And the other thing that was good was that you involved us in the analysis,
That's right.
which was quite challenging because of the
Tell me about
it. Some of us probably did it better than others, but the analysis was quite different and it was quite challenging. But then I think we identified that we needed more training. And then once we got the training, it kind of all fell into...
Yeah.
It was quite good having a bit before the training.
How closely did it match between your expectations of what co-researchers would be like in working with them to how it actually panned out?
Well, I didn't have a lot of experience of co-research, so I'd done lots of those kind of projects where you go and interview people with dementia or you interview family carers. So I don't think I had a huge expectation. I was very aware that people talk about it a lot, and then when you read the journal article or you read, I can't find it. I'm like, what do they mean by? So I really didn't want. That's why I suspect a few of you felt like you've been thrown in the deep end of the swimming pool, because I was like, you're going out to do the interviews, we're doing this properly, you're just going to come. I don't really care that you signed up last week, you can come and interview this trustee with me this week on Zoom, will be fine.
I mean, in a way, you listed a few bullet points about the co-researchers, but throughout the last 20 months, the team has moved the goalposts all the way for the better, I think, you know, and I think that's really what co-research is all about, isn't it? You listen, everybody listens to each other's information, bounce off ideas, and I think that's what's the good thing that came out of it over the last 20 months. You know, our team here, we're all equals, you know. And I think that's a good way to move forward with a lot of projects and organisations. We shouldn't just have that person there. I know the reason why that person's there, because if anything goes wrong, it's your fault. You know, I think that's part of the problem, being a leader, you know, so watch out, Alan.
Just back to the benefits of having community researchers, which I think is what this part is going to be about.
Right. That's it, first part.
I think for future researchers, you have to have that mix, because we're kind of the bridge between theory and real life. Because you can read as much as you like about anything theory-wise, but till you've lived it, and I mean, I can't imagine what you guys kind of a wee bit imagine, but till you've actually been there and done it yourself, it's a whole different perspective, you know. So you need the two sides, don't you?
I think that also with the evaluation, the project, I think is kind of triggered off a lot of new initiative in other areas, because I was speaking to Rosie recently, and NHS Scotland has set up a new thing called Neuro, now you keep me right, I'll send you the link for that. And basically they're looking for partners in research, which is their definition of community researchers, you know. So that means that what you guys have started here has triggered out a lot of new initiative right through the area. So they're looking at people from the academic side and the people who are living with that particular area, like in dementia. Yeah. I'll get you the proper link later on, you know. They're looking for people.
And I think the project itself has created a legacy.
Yeah.
Because that PhD students and people who come to me now are more looking for us to be involved earlier on, rather than just be the guinea pig. They want us to look at how they are looking at us on the committees to frame the questions or whatever. And so I think kind of the project itself is creating its own legacy, which is good.
To me, you know, I think it opened up a lot of doors for myself, you know, in terms of my past profession's gone now because I've retired for 10 years, and this has opened up a new revenue or a new ideas for myself and how I can move forward, you know, not necessarily just dementia, just in everything, you know. I just see life totally different for myself in terms of my development, you know.
Well, hello everyone. It's now over to me, a new face for this next section. I just want to say a huge thanks to all the community researchers that we've seen in that film. Just there, just a few bits of reflection from me, just some words that I'd written down when I was watching it, is that sense of that equality, equal partners in the evaluation, and genuinely equal partners, and you can really truly see that from that film. The mutual respect in the room for each other, the laughter, how relaxed they are as a group of people, and you can see the relationship that we've all had with each other and how that's played to their strengths and been really strong in terms of the work that they've done. The diversity of the group as well, and what Alan said is, you know, how that's been really important, but also not just to the evaluation, but to the group as individual community researchers as well, and learning about the different groups and the impact that the work has had. And also that they've grown together and they've evolved together, and now are seeking out new opportunities to take forward their learning and lots of skills and experience that they've developed. So a huge thanks to them all. I know that some of them are watching today in Stirling University as a group, so I'll say hello to them all. They've really brought so much to the evaluation, and I know, having spoken to many of them very recently, how much they've valued being part of the work and the opportunity to really enhance their skills and extend their involvement even further. I know for Myra especially, having been with the Trust from those early development stages, it's been quite special for her to have been with us at the start and now towards the ends, and to really have come full circle on our journey. And so before I go on to the next section, I better introduce myself as well. My name's Aline Crockett, and I am the joint CEO along with Carol, and I'm the director of the dementia programme here at the Life Changes Trust. So as many of you know, the evaluation report was published a few weeks ago, around the same time as both programmes were hosting their final legacy events. So through these events, and also from speaking with people about the report, there seemed to be some thematic questions that were coming through that people were commonly asking. So to answer some of those questions, I'm going to ask Louise McCabe from Stirling University to come back and join me, along with Annette Tate, who was one of those fabulous community researchers that you saw in the film, and who's been involved with the Trust for many years now as part of our work with unpaid carers, and she might mention that, I'm sure, on the dementia programme and many, many other things. She's a very busy woman. So welcome, Louise and Annette, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Arlene.
Thanks, Arlene.
Okay, so like Carol had with Alison, I've now got a few questions to ask you. So Louise, I'm going to kick off with you. So when you first saw that the Trust were looking for an independent evaluation, and in quite a significant scale, as you've already touched on in your opening presentation, what excited you about the project, and what made you want to take it on?
I mean, I knew about the Trust at the time when the evaluation was put out to tender. So I knew about the work that you were doing, particularly from the dementia side. I hadn't had any involvement prior to that with young people with care experience. So that was, I guess, one of the things that interested me, was to do a project where it kind of took me outside my normal frame of work. I was excited with the opportunity to do some co-production work, to bring in the community researchers, and it was, very clear that was going to be a part of the project. It looked a bit of a challenge, so I quite like that. And I also enjoy kind of bringing things together. So I like the mixed methods, the fact that we would be doing a whole range of types of evaluative research. So I kind of relish the idea of how you kind of find your way through these complicated sets of data. So yeah, it was an easy choice for me to apply.
Good, glad to hear it. And as Alison said, it's been an enormous piece of work, but we can't thank the staff enough for for what they have produced in terms of the report and all the other outputs in terms of learning, because it really is pretty powerful stuff and really will support a lot of the legacy work moving forward. So staying with you, Louise, and this has been touched on, I suppose, by Alison in her remarks, and also Alexis as well, is obviously the Trust has two main programmes of work, the dementia programme and the younger people with care experience programme. And we have always been asked about that. Carol mentioned that too, about the synergy between the two. And I suppose Alison's, as I say, touched a bit on that in terms of surprises around the report and the learning. But can you tell us a wee bit about what the evaluation told us about that synergy in relation to, similar gaps and thinking about inclusion, empowerment, etc. So can you explain a wee bit more about that synergy?
So I suppose maybe similarly to Alison, I think when we went in, we had I remember someone at a meeting saying, well, young people are at the beginning of their lives, they're concerned with employment, with skills, with education, it's, whereas older people with dementia or younger people with dementia, they're a different point in their life, and perhaps they've got kind of different needs or different wishes. And I think what I hope comes through really strongly in the report, that there was a lot of shared feelings between the groups, a lot of shared wishes, a lot of shared values. There was this shared drive to challenge stigma, to stand up and be a part of something, to share messages, to develop skills and knowledge, to become leaders, to have a meaningful contribution, to be able to be part of life, whatever stage of life you're at, being able to still belong somewhere, have a feeling of belonging, but also a feeling that you meaningfully contribute and that you're a part of life. So those kind of, underlying more emotional, personal aspects, I think really resonate across the groups. And I hope that came out strongly in the report.
I think it definitely did, and at the end of the day, I suppose it's about people at the end of the day, regardless of what their background is, where they've come from, what their experiences are. It's about taking that real essence of individuals and then building and developing that. And I think what you could see from the community researchers film in particular is the strength of that relationship, and you know, and how it's been really important to bring those groups of people together, because they've learned from each other, they've developed alongside each other, and will now go off and influence either collectively or individually within their own sectors or their own communities. So it's brilliant to see that development. So thank you. So one of the key thrusts, Louise, of the evaluation was to the extent to which the Trust had met its aims, so sustainable and transformational change. So it's the $1 million question, but I have it here to ask you, so I'll apologise in advance. But what did you find?
Fine. So I'm going to read out from the Deed of Trust, which was what was, you know, there at the very start of Life Changes Trust. So apologies for reading this off my piece of paper, but the aim of the Trust was to have substantial and lasting impact and achieve long-term transformational change for two groups of young and older people in greatest needs. It will have the overall purpose of helping to improve individual lives. So we pull out some of the key words. So substantial is the first word. And I think, you know, I think that one is easy to support. We can see the reach of the Trust, we can see the number of projects, we can see the huge number of people that have been engaged with or in some way touched by the Trust. You know, there's reach across Scotland in rural areas, urban areas, you know, so I think that the notion of it being substantial is quite straightforward to kind of say, yes, you've done that. Lasting, so this is the notion of legacy. So we can see that in the legacy projects, but we, you know, and they will continue for years, and hopefully we'll continue to build that legacy and to share that legacy. But we could see it in all the organisations that work with the Trust, whether they had funding or were engaged in events, you know, the way that they're picking up different ways of working, new ideas, different ways of talking. We can see it in policy, you know, coming through strongly at local level and starting to influence at national level. So the notion of lasting, I think is there. You know, we don't know, we can't tell. We will have to come back in another 10 years and check, but you know, it's looking good. The notion of transformational change is very interesting, and we have a PhD student working on the project who hasn't finished yet, and her whole focus is on what do we mean by transformational, what do young people mean. She's particularly focusing on that programme. So maybe I'll wait and I'll let you know what she finds. But I think transformational means so many different things, doesn't it, for different people? So I think we could see individual lives transformed, absolutely. You know, we just have to think of Carol and Malcolm in the film, you know, and the transformation that they had seen. But we're also seeing transformation at, you know, kind of organisational levels and above. And then the very last bit is to help improve individual lives, you know, so that's always been the, you know, the core purpose. And I think, you know, we see that again and again and again across, whether it was our data, whether it was in a report, you know, whether it was at an event, we were listening to somebody speak. So yes, I just say yes.
Yeah, and thanks for articulating it in that way, because it's really good to bring us back to the original, to the Trust deed and what the Trust was set out to achieve, if you like, and to kind of bring the evaluation back to that and to reference that. I think it's been really helpful, and we still have a wait and see moment to see what happens with the PhD study. But yeah, thanks Louise for articulating it so well, so thank you. So Annette, over to you. We've left you there. So obviously you're one of our fantastic community researchers on the project, and it is something I'm sure Louise has been asked about, and we've been asked about a lot in the work that we do, is why use community researchers. So first of all, as a community researcher and as a really good friend to the Trust, what attracted you to the project?
Well, like you said earlier, I've been involved with the Trust. It started about 5 years ago when I was in the group that set up and ran the first By Carers for Carers dementia conference down in Glasgow. And since then, which was an amazing experience, and since then I've attended events, I've done peer support work, and found out a lot more about the projects that the trusts supported in and around Aberdeen area, which is, again, the impact they've made there has been amazing. So when I found out about being a community researcher, I thought it'd be good to know if they've had a similar impact around other parts of Scotland and what the legacy would be. So I just thought, right, this is the way to do it. This is the way to find out. So yeah, I was glad to be part of the team.
Great. And yeah, you've been with us for a long time and many various projects in it, which we hugely appreciate. So you were a well-known face to the trust, that's for sure. So it was good to see you getting involved in something else and supporting us to end well and bring the work of the trust to a close. So thank you for that.
I'm really, really pleased to be able to do it. So yeah.
Thank you. So, as a community researcher, what has been your biggest learning curve, and also what's given you the most satisfaction?
Well, I mean, for me, I knew little, if anything, about the Young People Care Experience programme because I'd always been focused on the dementia side of the Trust's work. So that was a huge learning curve. It was different terminology, Champions Board, what on earth is a Champions Board? But because I was part of the team, the rest of the team, it was so easy to ask questions, get support, and so it turned out not to be a problem at all. It was just part of the whole process. The things I enjoyed, I think it was the interviews probably more than anything, especially the ones with beneficiaries, because you really got the sense from them about what the difference the trust has made to these people, especially some of the smaller projects, because I don't think we can appreciate the effects that smaller projects have and the ripple effects. And when there was one project, I think it was Frog Life down in Glasgow, they had encouraging people to get out and enjoy nature. And since then, they've expanded that into care homes and community groups. And it's really hard to quantify the ripple effects, but I think they're just as important, if not more important, in reducing stigma, supporting people in all the three groups, and raising awareness. So I think that's an important part of the whole thing as well. And also being part of the team has been, really enjoyed it. We're trying to learn things, but it's been a great experience.
Yeah. And you could see that in the film, the relationship between you all, Louise and Sarah, and then you guys as community researchers was just really, really lovely to watch. So yeah, you could see how close you all were. So I'm not going to, there was another question I was going to ask you both, but we're kind of pressed for time. So Louise, I'm going to end with you and just ask you what your biggest takeaway headline from the final result of the evaluation is that's applicable to projects, to decision makers and funders alike. So the biggest takeaway headline, you think?
And this is a nearly impossible question, but I'm going to go with...
Don't make it easy.
I mean, I could just say valuing people and investing in people. That would be the simplest. But I think it's this partnership, this co-production, this participatory approach, but understanding the investment that you need for that that there's time and effort involved in, but that when you do things in this way, you absolutely reap the benefits, and and you end up with the kind of impact and change that you're looking to create. So yeah, investing in people and relationships, and yeah, is that.
Thanks very much, Louise. I'm sorry to put the pressure on. So thank you both so much. We could spend a long time talking about this, but unfortunately we don't have that. So thanks for joining me. We really appreciate your time, and Annette, you especially, and all those community researchers that I know that are watching from Stirling, and those others that couldn't make it that are watching or will catch up later on. Just thank you for everything that you brought to the evaluation. Because it's just been fantastic. So I'll let you both go now, and I'm now going to hand back over to Alexis. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you very much again to Arlene, Annette and Louise, and also to the community researchers. I loved the enthusiasm and the good humour which came across in the film. Well, we are now at the end of today's webinar. It has been a privilege to have been with the Life Changes Trust since 2013 when it all began, and indeed to chair this event. We have come a very long way from the beginning, not without its teething problems in the early years, as been referred to earlier, but we learned and moved on. And it was indeed a rare privilege to be endowed with so much money by the lottery to try to achieve our objectives. In partnership with our beneficiaries, I do believe we have contributed to significant change for the better, both at a strategic and policy level, and also for the better at an individual level for our beneficiaries. Overall, I also believe that we have improved the quality of life for tens of thousands of people in Scotland, and it could not have been done without the partnership of so many of those who have contributed to our work. We are very grateful to every single individual and project we've met along the way and for their commitment, energy, enthusiasm and investment. Investment not only in the rights and empowerment of people living with dementia, unpaid carers and young people with care experience today, but in the future of those who come after them. And I'd also like to say thank you to all of those who contributed their time to make this event possible, and for everyone who has joined us this morning. Thank you so much and goodbye.